Hey guys, welcome back to another edition of StarCraft 2 Team Strategy. So what I'm going to be discussing today is all of the maps in the 4v4 map pool and kind of going over great strategies for each map, compositions you should be getting as far as your army goes, what strategies to watch out for, and also, just the map features in general and how you can exploit them. So what we're going to go kind of through here is you'll notice the map is Deadlock Ridge. It has a pretty wide ramp to start. It's possible for one player to block it off, but in general you're probably going to need about two players to block this off because it's going to take more than just four buildings such as two pylons and two gateways or something like that, or two barracks and two supply depots. This map is very good for Terran and Protoss teams because in general it's pretty easy to kind of defend these bases here. Zergs, it's a really long rush distance, so for them to get across the map and do early pull strategies is not the best. But if you do have, more Zergs than the other team, I'd say it's very good for macro. This map has a ton of expansions, and all the expansions on it, except for the ones off to the side here, are pretty easy to defend. Even these ones up front are fairly easy to defend, especially if your team's able to take control of the Xel'Naga watchtowers. And these are going to be really key throughout the game because these are going to give you vision of not only when enemies are coming to attack, but also pretty much the majority of the map in the center. So you're going to almost always be able to see drops coming, blink stalkers going across the map somewhere or something like that. Speaking of blink stalkers is a very strong strategy on this map because you'll notice that basically there's a large ledge leading on either side of the bases. So it's very easy for someone to have an overlord just kind of hovering here, or someone to get an observer later in the game and just basically blink up into your base, kill off your main or some probes and then get out very quickly. And also, when they do try and escape, there's many places where they have ledges they can just hop right down. So blink stalkers are a really strong strategy on this map. I'd say generally when I get Protoss on this map, I'll usually get Blink Stalkers and a Twilight Tech before I go for Colossus, just because with all this wide open space, Colossus aren't really that great unless if you have kind of choked off areas like some of our other maps that we'll get into. So in general, Protoss, you're better off with Twilight Tech as far as games go on this map. Terran players, I'd say tanks, pretty good on this map, especially because if you have one Terran player here, you can more or less kind of defend both ramps if you have the tanks set up in the middle here. And this essentially forces the enemy to try and have to engage into tanks, which also makes it very easy to defend expansions. Also because of the large rush distance and also the Xel'Naga towers, defending expansions as Terran and other races is much easier because you often have plenty of time to prepare before they even get across the map. Zerg players I kind of already went over. Early pull strategies not that great on this map, unless if, for instance, the players that are on this side are all Zerg or something like that. I'd say because even one Protoss player on this side could easily go a Gate Forge build, just wall off completely and get cannons, and then protect him and his ally. And then all of a sudden you want that early pull, and you're going to be behind in drones for pretty much the entire game. Alright, let's see. Drop strategy is also quite good on this map, I'd say, because there is a lot of space kind of along the edges of the map and also along the front side of the bases where you can easily get drops in and get them out before the enemy can actually run around into their base. Because it's a pretty long way if you're camped out front here to get from here back to the enemy base right here. That's a pretty long distance to go for most players. I'd say you're going to find as the game progresses on, taking third bases and keeping your economy going is going to be pretty difficult. What I've found is you absolutely need to destroy these rocks leading into these expansions over here. And whatever side, I'd say in general, if you're on the bottom side of the map, which would be this part right here, I'd say you're better off going for the gold expansion on this side because it's a little bit easier to defend because you have the Xel'Naga overlooking it. Whereas it's easier for the other team to control this Xel'Naga tower because they have a ramp leading in from this side. Whereas you have to come all the way around here and destroy these destructible rocks. So even though it might seem like this is the better goal to take if you're on the bottom, it really isn't. Alright, well now I've gone over this map. I'll get into the next one in just a sec. Okay, we got the second map load up here. This is District 10. It's a pretty well defensible map, especially if you have 3 Terrans or Protoss on your team. There's only 2 main ramps leading into your base that are unprotected. You got this front one here, which is probably going to take 2 players to block off in most cases. And you also have a side ramp here, which in general 1 player is going to be able to block off. Zergs on this map, pretty strong, because macro is a very good option for Zergs on this map, especially even if you only have 1 Zerg and the other team has 2. If your partners can block off the ramps, you have a pocket expansion back here which allows the Zerg player to macro up and eventually get, you know, ahead in economy and also provide a Mutalisk or something else later in the game to harass. Key strategies for Zergs on this map. If the other team has 2 or more Zergs, there's almost no way that they're going to be able to completely block these ramps off. And also the fact that there's destructible rocks leading into the back of your base. Early pull strategies are pretty strong on this map. You're almost always going to be able to apply at least a little bit of pressure on the front, and the destructible rocks, once they go down, they have a wide ramp. This is wider than even the one that leads into the front of your base. So once these go down, it's going to be no problem for Zergs applying pressure, and Ling run-bys are going to be a real problem for the other team. Protoss strategies on this map. Most of the time, Blink Stalkers are the better option because of this wide area that you can blink in or along the destructible rocks. Colossus are also quite good on this map. So you could go either or. It all depends on how aggressive your team is being. If you're playing more of the defensive role because your team doesn't have as many Zergs or as many mobile units, then you probably want to go Colossus. Whereas if you're being more of an aggressive team and you're constantly counterattacking, then you probably want to go with Blink Stalkers and Twilight Tech. Colossus are pretty good on this map just because most of the areas you can block with just a couple force fields or really narrow them down. Especially the kind of the narrow chokes here that lead into the expansions. In general, most of the games, once they get into mid and late game, will end up being one team basically sitting kind of near their expansions, maybe even up towards this side a little bit, protecting these Xel'Naga watchtowers, and also another player usually sitting right around here kind of defending these expansions. This way all 4 players can pretty much defend all 4 of these main expansions here without too much of a hassle. And controlling the Xel'Naga watchtowers you're going to find is really important on this map, because if you take all 4 Xel'Naga watchtowers, you're going to find that you have vision across the entire map. So you're always going to be able to detect incoming attacks or drops or anything like that. As you progress into the late game, you're going to find that 3rd and 4th bases are pretty plentiful. Especially because you have a pocket expansion for someone who takes their first expand, and also these ones along the side here aren't really that difficult to defend, because usually if you take these expansions, you already have this Xel'Naga watchtower and you're kind of overlooking this side. In my opinion, this is probably the hardest expand to take on the entire map, because until you take down these destructible rocks, it takes ridiculously long to go from this ramp all the way to this side over here. Terran strategies, I'd say drops, Banshees are very good on this map because there's a lot of places that you can kind of go along on the destructible rock side. A lot of the expands kind of have a little bit of space here. You can also do drops kind of up, take this Xel'Naga watchtower and then go in and take out this Expo or this Expo. Tanks get very good later in the game, especially when you're trying to control these towers. Oftentimes what I'll do as a Terran is I'll eventually kind of just take this Xel'Naga watchtower and just camp tanks right here, and this will basically cut off the enemy's access to our base on this side of the map. As far as Zerg strategy goes, Infestors are pretty good on this map, but I would say if you do go Infestors, you're probably going to want to get Broodlords later in the game. Ling run-bys are strong all game long on this map because it's so large and counterattacks are so strong. And Mutalisks are also very good on this map because there's a lot of dead space in the middle where one team's not really going to be able to defend them effectively. Alright, well thanks for watching this part. We'll get on to the next map in just a sec. Welcome to the next map, Extinction, guys. This map is pretty difficult to defend on because even one Zerg on your team can end up making a hole for the rest of your team. This ramp is going to take at least 4 buildings to block off in most cases, and the rush distance is probably the